Hello, everybody, and welcome to Carnivore Personnel Sideshow with Jacques.
And this is Biff.
And today we're breaking down our favorite guitarists and singers and trying to find out which we haven't yet come up with a better term for Mount Rushmore. And I hate that. It's like, I hate that.
The
I
Beatles of the rock. The Beatles of rock.
Yeah, well, they say the Beatles of singers and guitarists. So Biff, you want to do guitars or singers first?
I don't really have a preference, so yeah, go ahead and pick one.
Let's go with singers.
All right.
Now,
sounds good.
So, what are your criteria for your lists?
I think I think my overall criteria is somewhat similar. Where I do want so there's an emphasis on the stuff that I listen to. So singers is one of those deals where I'm going to be not naming some amazing singers let's say like Aretha Franklin. If you told me, I cannot argue the case of Aretha Franklin being better than anybody on my list, but Aretha Franklin is not the music that I listen to. So, and these are kind of a combination of either the stuff that I listen to or the bands that influence the stuff that I listen to. So there's a little bit of a qualification there. So, and there's a heavy rock lean to it, right? So it's really about a rock lean. So you know what, if you told me that Whitney Houston is a better singer than the people that I named, I cannot debate you on that. So that's kind of the premise of mine stuff, but I'm doing it within a certain context. So how about you?
Same. I'm going with, and it's this, like when we had this debate, and it's funny because I talked to a buddy of mine whose favorite band is Rush. He's seen them live like 30 times. And I was telling him, it's like, yeah, when I did my list, I'm not saying Tom McGinnis from Buffalo Tom or Larry Moen Jr. from U2 is better than Neil Peart. I just listen to those bands more, and those bands influence my style of playing more. Doesn't mean that I don't listen to YYC and think, oh, yeah, fuck, he's not. But my list was based on who inspired me to play and my style playing. And with singing, now this is fair and unfair. Part of my process when I think of lead singers, generally, not always, but most of the time, your lead singers of the band are also your lead lyricist. And lyrics to me,
except for Rush, right?
Well, except for Rush, except for the Who. Pete Townsend wrote all the Who songs, music and lyrics. Yeah, no, there's exceptions.
Oh, and then obviously anything that Ozzy Osbourne's been involved with, because that dude has a vocabulary of a sixth grader.
So truly, a lot of the singers that I have on here, it's because how I feel about their music, how their music makes me feel, what I go back to and listen to over and over, and I'm on the same page. It's like, yeah, any of these people on Broadway, from the musicals like Wicked that I love, yeah, Asina Mendel is a much better singer than anybody.
Tara, look at her go with her fresh cup of Joe. Sorry.
But that said, let's dive in. I mean, you give me somebody on your list.
You want me to go straight to my list?
First of all, do you think we'll have any crossover?
I think that I have a chance of maybe one crossover at most. That would be, I think that there's one guy that has a chance, but I kind of doubt it.
I'm thinking one, maybe two, but let's see. Okay. So you go first. So who you got?
Okay, so my four people are Freddie Mercury, Robert Plant. The next two are the kind of where it kind of gets kind of fuzzy, but the next two are Ann Wilson and Dio. So those are my four.
Okay, you came out of the gate strong. Can you see my list? Oh no, my. Let's see if I can get my list.
I get all kind. No, that's garbage. Just read it out.
Number one, Freddie Mercury.
Okay, that's the one that I thought we might cross on.
I also toggle back and forth for my fourth place of whether it's like Prince or David Bowie, because I thought maybe you might have Prince on there, but I got Freddie Mercury, Black Francis, or Frank Black, depending on how he wants to say his name that day, Bono, and Dan Cray. And I know that's selfish. And it's either Dan Cray or Prince. Prince, much better singer, but I just love Dan's lyrics. But But that's what I'm going to go with.
I
Freddie
think
Mercury.
I think that so I think that might be another category that we consider in terms of a songwriter, right? So
Yeah, maybe you know what? I'll take him off of this, and I will go Freddie Mercury, Frank Black, Bono, and I'm going to go Prince.
okay, yeah. You know what? I can't argue with at least half of it, right? But Black, I don't know who Frank Black and Black Francis is, so
Singer of the Pixies.
Oh, okay. Of course, the Pixies are involved. Holy shit! What a shot!
And the thing about him, and the argument I make for him, and even if you don't like it, his style of singing is, and I spent a lot of time this week like going down my iTunes library and just trying to think if there's anybody his singing style compares to, and there's really not. There's no other band that I listen to that I love that and I've heard other people copy their music. I like OK Go, you can hear their influences, and other bands that I like. You can hear so many bands I like. You can hear Pixie influences and the drumming and the bass and the song structure. But his singing style is so unique and so different. That's why I have him on my list.
Yeah. Okay. Are you gonna advance him to the final four?
It's between him and Bono for that. But Freddie Mercury, well, Freddie. I mean,
I think Freddie. Okay, so we
Freddie
we
Mercury.
have both. So he's in, right? Because we both have him, right?
Yeah, we both had a number one on our list. Whether
so we don't have to debate that, right? Yeah, it's weird. So like, it's what I'm kind of finding weird is that I had spent like a extended period of time thinking that Freddie Mercury was underappreciated in this country, and I have this strange bias that is influenced by the fact that I buy Japanese music magazines. And obviously, Queen is Queen and they're great, but I think the Japanese like Queen in a way that is almost unnatural. Like they really, really, really like Queen. Like where they're it wouldn't surprise me if they were considered to be above a lot of the I think Queen is in this country is in that second tier, but there's that first tier that involves like the bands like the Doors and the Led Zeppelin and the Who and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. I mean, those are like kind of like the upper level guys, and Queen is in that second level. But I think that in Japan, Queen is actually in that first level. I wouldn't be surprised if Queen was more popular than say the Rolling Stones in Japan.
And in my world, and Queen, I don't know anybody who doesn't have them above the bands that you mentioned. And generally speaking, I think over the last 20 years, I think they've become more appreciated in the last 20 years. And I think the movie helped a lot of cases, but I also think 20 years removed or 40 years removed from things like Live Aid and seeing how big Queen was, right. And it's just their catalog. And then I don't know if over the last upteen years their catalog has become more commercialized. They let more things go to commercialization, and so people are hearing it more. I mean that in a good way.
So we have these little periods. So I think in a strange way, like Wayne's World doing Bohemian Rhapsody,
yes,
kind of elevated them like briefly, right? And then you have these other things that somewhat elevated them, and I think that I'm not unique in that it's similar to Metallica, where people left Metallica when they released the Black Album. A lot of people left Queen when they released the Game album, when they did Another One Bites the Dust, where they became less of the pure rock band and became a more of a crossover band. And then the next one had that I Want to Break Free, which was, I don't think that was a song that people were ready for, right? So I think they had that issue. So certainly their kind of progress they had this period of huge success, and then they had this period of people accusing them of a combination of selling out or not being the band that they were, whatever the case may be, right? So they had that. But
it's funny because of all things to say, I Want to Break Free, which is a top at least a top 10, top 5 song, or top 10 for sure, maybe top 5 song for Queen for me. And now I see it in commercials. That's the one when I was thinking,
Right.
oh, I've heard of that in commercials a lot lately.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is, it's like I don't care if it's, the World Cup, if it's the Stanley Cup, if it's the Little League Baseball World Series, what song gets sung at the end?
Obviously, right?
I mean, and they do.
Right.
They have some of these rock anthems, and I got to go back many years ago. Biff's son is just one of my favorite people. He's always been just this great kid. And I will never not be appreciative to your son for turning me onto epic rap battles of history. And my favorite one is Frank Sinatra versus Freddie Mercury. And there's so many points that the Freddie Mercury character makes in there about, it's true. It's true that how many rock anthems, I mean, Guns N' Roses have a couple, like, Metallica, all these great bands have stuff that gets played at baseball games and hockey games and UFC fights. But Queen has just so many rock anthems that are just epic. And just, I think maybe 20 years ago, Queen, the Stones are still out there touring, and I know Queen is too, but Queen with the guy from American Idol versus
Adam Lambert,
Adam Lambert versus, I mean, there will not be another Freddie Mercury.
So that's its own thing, right? But I mean, that opening of News of the World with We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, like those two are like, I mean, that's kind of like, you have like, whatever, 7 minutes of arena sport music, right there, in that one shot right at the beginning of that album. But it is one of those things where I may overappreciate Freddie Mercury. That's based on my heritage or whatever the case may be, but it's just, there's just something about his singing that is just unlike any other. So
Under Pressure is my all-time favorite song. I'm sorry, my all-time favorite non-Dan Gray song.
Non-Dan Gray song.
And there was an episode of Conan's podcast a year ago with him and Lin-Manuel Miranda going note by note, breaking that song down and just listening to how much that song meant to Conan and how much it meant to them. It's like that's just a song. So so Freddie Mercury. So who was the second one on your list?
My second person on the list was Robert Plant.
See, that's another one I toggled. And I'll be honest. I'll be really honest. Led Zeppelin has always been one of my bands. Just a band since junior high that I loved. I mean, they were in junior high, they were a little behind, like, the Police and Rush and then they were just this band. I gotta be honest, over the last, I'm gonna say decade, I love them a little less as the history of their thievery has become more.
Yeah.
And look, everybody steals from everybody. We wouldn't have the Beatles if the Beatles didn't steal from X, Y, and Z. And we wouldn't have this band if it didn't steal from that band. But it's a difference between somebody influencing your sound,
right,
making a killing on covering somebody.
Let's just say, you know what? They have not lost court cases, right? So Beatles have not lost a court case over plagiarism. Led Zeppelin has, right?
And just to steal from people who, it's funny. Like when Fatboy Slim had that "Praise You" song, and it was hysterical because that woman was an old gospel singer. The album came 40 years ago, never did anything, and she made more money off that. And if Led Zeppelin had ever gone back and been like, dude, this riff is great. You and I talked about it a little while ago. Dave Grohl was on a show. I forget whose show he was on, but he was basically like flat out saying, this is whose drumming riffs
he's still from the Gap Band, I want to say, right?
It was that was one. The Gap Band was one. He mentioned two drummers, and he goes, and I saw one of these guys at a party, and I went up. I'm like, dude, I use so much of your licks, and then he's like, yeah, we know, and it's like, but he owns it. Look, like I said, I mean, I love drum. When I learned to drum, there was like a couple bands and a couple songs specifically. I just put on the headphones till I could figure it out. Larry Moen did this tiny, tiny half beat thing on I Will Follow that took me forever to figure out. It's simple, but it took me a while. I mean, and it's like, yeah, I've incorporated that beat and that
Yeah.
lick and stuff. But for them, so Robert Plant, it's hard to argue because fuck man,
Yeah.
he
So
was
yeah,
rock.
yeah.
He was
So
rock.
so the funny thing about it is that I'm not a huge, Led Zeppelin fan. I love a lot of their music. There are some songs that I absolutely adore, but I never grew up being a Robert Plant fan. Like of this list, Robert Plant is the only guy that I put out that is where I'm not this huge fan of the band, right? But it's hard for me to essentially believe that other bands that I absolutely adore would have existed without Robert Plant doing what he did, right? So I think that it's strictly for the vocal aspect that I put him in. So
Yeah, no, I get that. So so I know you're not a huge U2 guy, but I have Bono in there, and for a couple reasons. A,
yeah,
I mean, he's just dude, we're well past 40 years of being awesome. And I like his politics, I like this, but I like his lyrics, but also I just think he's amazing singers. And there are some songs that I listen to, the other day I was working out and I put on the Unforgettable Fire album and um I put on Rhythm what was it? October, which
yeah,
is an
yeah,
unappreciated
yeah,
album. And he doesn't have the greatest range, and he doesn't have some other like tools in the
yep,
box that some other people. But I just always, I mean, for 40 years I've loved this guy.
yeah.
And my top 10 list, my top five
Right,
list
right, sure.
has changed. I don't think U2's ever come out of my top 10 list.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I will say about Bono is that within the framework of that group of music, I thought that Bono is an important guy, but I think that guys like, and this is gonna be freaking weird coming out of my pie hole because I have really no business talking about it, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway, right? I think some guys like like David Gahan is like more important in terms of what the Smiths did in forming that alternative, you know, genre. I mean, I think U2 is the bigger band, but I almost think like the Smiths are like the so-called Velvet Underground of that genre, and then to some degree, maybe even Robert Smith of The Cure, right? I mean, that guy,
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
100%.
I mean, he's a guy who, like, once again, not a guy who is in my, wheelhouse as far as vocalists go, but I completely freaking get, what that guy did, and I completely freaking get, like, you see his, footprints all over the other bands that came after him, right? So Bono's not a bad pick, but I personally think Gahan and Smith are like the bigger singers, when I look at that genre in general. That's kind of my feeling on it.
Yeah, in that time capsule in that age, the thing is like Bono's music changed and they grew, and it's like that's why. Yeah, look, when I said I put on headphones and learned to play, the Boys Don't Cry is probably the song I played the most in like 1988, 90 when I first started playing over and over and over and
Yeah.
over. And Disintegration and Pictures of You, that song and that album is why my buddy Dan and I literally met over me playing that album in a friend's room. I lived off campus, but I was visiting him at the dorm. I was playing that CD, and Dan staggered in to see who was playing that album because it had come out that summer and he loved it. And lo and behold, we decided to start a band. So that said, yeah, I mean, those guys are so important. But like I said, the body of work, the 40 years of what he's done and continues to do, that's why he's on my list. Who else? Who was your next guy? You had Dio. Oh, I'm not hearing you again.
Yeah, I have Ann Wilson and I had Dio
Ann Wilson. Okay, Ann
of
Wilson's an
Heart.
interesting pick.
Yeah, and I think so there is a lot of things that are um criticism of her that is very, very I cannot refute. Like, one of them is this is a clearly Heart was clearly an act that was influenced by Led Zeppelin because hey, guess what? They're really the best Led Zeppelin cover band I've ever seen. I mean, and only because Ann Wilson could hit those Robert Plant high notes with no problems. But there was a lot of what they did that was clearly influenced by Led Zeppelin. But I think I kind of struggled in this position between Ann Wilson and to some degree Joni Mitchell, but but I think the big thing here is that I looked at this position more along the lines of who kind of shaped the direction of music. So there was Janis Joplin was another one that I thought about in this space. And then there was also, to some degree, Stevie Nicks that I thought about in this space. But I think that I kind of chose Ann Wilson only because that she kind of pushed the music in a direction where she was doing stuff that people weren't expecting women to do, right? So, and the Runaways to some degree did some of that, but in a way, this is a woman that fronted a hard rock band, and now that thing is relatively commonplace, and I think that made her kind of important. And then I picked Dio after that because it's Dio and I Am Who I Am. So that one is really a fanboy choice. Even though he is an important guy in the metal genre, he is highly influential. But hey, you know what? I picked him because I love the guy.
Okay, so who's our four? I obviously
So
Freddie Mercury.
so we got Freddie Mercury, right? So who are you going to give a pass to?
I give a pass to Frank Black.
Frank Black.
Or Black
of
Francis.
Course, because the stupid Pixies is going to be on the fucking Mount Rushmore. So my heart really says that Dio is probably the guy I want to put on my pass, but I'm going to put in Ann Wilson here.
Oh, interesting.
Only largely because I just feel like she's the person that deserves that position. I mean, as much as I love Dio, there's no way that I can argue that Ann Wilson is less influential than Dio overall within the the rock music.
I didn't mention my fourth guy. My fourth guy is Prince.
Yes, I have that on the list.
Okay,
so
yeah.
So who do you want? Who do you want to nominate?
Oh gosh,
I'll tell you what. I'll make it easier
tough.
for you. I am going to fucking veto Bono.
Okay,
I'm going to use my veto.
Okay.
So we're not going to talk about Bono. So you tell me why Prince should be above either Robert Plant. Well, I'm not going to even argue for Dio because Dio was my emotional pick. So Robert Plant versus Dio. You tell me why Robert Plant over Dio or Dio over Robert Plant.
I would take Robert Plant. I mean, like I said, I mean, and when I describe my oldest son's hair, which you know very well,
right.
He's Robert Plant 1975. Like that's the hair. He's either Robert Plant 75 or David Lee Roth like 84. So like somewhere in there. But dude, Prince is just.
I think that Prince is one of those guys though. Like,
but his range is so crazy.
Yeah, I have so maybe we should talk about. I have a category that I've considered called musical genius, and and freaking spoiler alert, Prince is in that Mount Rushmore of musical genius. So maybe we need to have a musical genius catalog.
Yeah, a musical genius one would be great. Yeah, because no, 100%. So gosh, that will be a fun one. Yeah, musical genius next. I second the motion. So we got Freddie Mercury, Frank Black.
Ann
Wilson. God, the only reason I don't love the Robert Plant, the only reason is just because, but I don't blame him for the thievery. It's funny because I honestly believe, and I love Jimmy Page. I love Jimmy Page. We've talked about it. But I don't think Robert Plant was as guilty as Jimmy Page, but he was driving the getaway car, so he might have not held up the bank. But yeah, both great picks. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. I'm fine with that list. Guitarist, I'm gonna go first.
All right, let's hear your list. You're gonna probably have to tell me how to spell some of these people.
Jay Mascis.
Holy fuck. Okay.
Hendrix.
Okay.
Joey Santiago,
Oh my fucking god! Fucking Pixies again!
and it's either coming down to, and you're gonna hate this, it's either coming down to
Oh,
either
don't tell me the edge. Don't say the edge.
The
Don't say the
Edge.
edge. Don't say the edge. Don't say the edge.
the
Don't say
Edge
the edge.
or Prince. But I would like to point out my honorable mentions, and it's rare to have two guitarists from the same band both considered in my top 10 favorite guitarists of all time. And strangely, I think you're going to back me up. Because I can't pick one over the other. I can't pick between David St. Hubbins and Nigel Tufnell. I mean,
what? No. Nigel is clearly the one you pick.
Nigel. Okay, all right. But yeah, my list either has the Edge or Prince, but
who is it gonna be?
I'll take out the Edge just so you don't yell at me. But honestly, because of his,
fuck.
I mean, no, I know he's not the shredder, and he relies so
It
much
has
on
nothing to
pedals
do with
and
the
technique.
fact that he's not the shredder. That,
I
you know,
love
like,
his sound.
yeah.
But the fact that you know a U2 sound when you hear it. Very few people within the first couple notes, you're like, oh, this has got to be a new U2 song. But anyways, I took them off. But Jay Mascis, Hendrix, Joey Santiago, and Prince. Who do you got? Who's your list?
Okay, so one of them is going to be the easy one, which is Jimi Hendrix. I mean, to me, everything in the rock world starts with Jimi Hendrix. You know, all you people who want to make the Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton argument, you could just freaking go to hell.
Yeah.
You know, it really starts with Jimi Hendrix. So, I kind of saw it in these. My list. The first three was the easiest. The fourth is the one that is I just tossing in. The second one is Eddie Van Halen because, at that time, it's like essentially there was this Hendrix era, and he did this thing where he was the man. I mean, there were other guys, but he really was the man. And then Eddie Van Halen came along, and then he became the man. And then the third guy that came around about 5 years later is Yngwie Malmsteen. And so those are my three guys who are kind of like these. The foundational guitar wanker guys, right? So Hendrix is the one that's hard to argue. And hey, guess what? On both of our lists, so we don't have to argue about it. The fourth guy is the one that I struggled with, and I actually had my discussions with Scotty Black in terms of, who should be there, who I wanted there. The guy that I actually wanted there is a guy named Michael Schenker, but he really doesn't deserve to be. It's just a guy that I just happen to really, really, really love, right? And there's other, this is where the traditionalists will see the Claptons and the Page and the Becks and all kind of worthy in their own rights. But I want to throw in a guy named Gary Moore that people have not heard of. So that's that. But I think I do want to mention, the three, and then I think within that genre, I think Carlos Santana is grossly underappreciated. So I think that guy deserves a mention. And then I think there's two guitarists in the hard rock arena that is really a foundational guys that I think are worth mentioning. One of them I talked about last week, which is Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. And that guy, he's one of those guys that created this foundational basis of an entire genre. So he's really not the best guitarist, really not. Thanks to a factory accident, he's missing tips of his fingers, where he plays with his wacky prosthetics. Yet he's kind of the guy that established a certain sound in the metal genre. And then the second guy is Angus Young, who I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Angus Young, but it's hard for me to really question the amount of influence he's had in this genre. But obviously there's a bunch of other guys. Stevie Ray Vaughan is another one. There's a bunch of other guys that are important guitarists. So that, I'm not going to ramble on and on because I'll just talk for the next 45 minutes.
So who's your automatic pass into the list?
So this is the one where I obviously emotionally I want to give the automatic pass to Gary Moore. But the automatic pass that I'm going to give to is Yngwie Malmsteen, because I think that he is an important enough guy. And even though he is less important than than Eddie Van Halen, I actually personally am more influenced by his music than Eddie Van Halen. So I'm going to leave Eddie Van Halen kind of twisting in the wind. and I'm gonna just go ahead and put in Yngwie Malmsteen. So, and I'm gonna presume that Hendrix is on the list. So go ahead and give me your guy that you're gonna put in.
I'm not going to do it to you and put the Pixie guy in, but I am going to put.
You freaking can. I don't give a shit.
No, I'm putting in Jay Mascis because Jay Mascis,
Okay.
there's a tree, like they talk about the coaching tree in the NFL. He has a tree of disciples under him who have gone on to do other great things. And he's still thought of as this guitarist, and the alt rock world and stuff like that. There isn't a band that I don't love that doesn't point to that guy and say, yeah, Dinosaur Jr. was a huge influence in Jay Mascis. And, he's also produced so many bands I love, and he's played on so many other bands I love's album. He sits in almost like a studio guy. So my free pass would be to him. I also, would not, like, I love Prince. I mean, he is underrated as a guitarist. Like, that's one of the things. It's like he is grossly underrated as a musician, because he's one of those things. He's so fucking good at every aspect of it. But I wouldn't put up a fight if the fourth guy on the list was Eddie Van Halen, because
I think that's kind of a right call, right? I would say this about Prince is that Prince, there is nothing that Prince did that wasn't great, right? I mean, that's kind of where it kind of starts. But the thing about Prince is that obviously he doesn't have the influence that Eddie Van Halen does, over the course of his career, right? I mean, he's not, Prince was just a freaking musical genius that created this unbelievable, catalog of music. But it's not like he did something that was Hendrix, right? Like Hendrix changed the direction of electric guitar, right? So
I know it's funny. My two favorite Prince stories, and if I can remember when I post this, I'll go on YouTube and find it. The Saturday Night Live, I think it was the Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary concert show. It was a private show.
It was an after party. Yeah.
An after party. Yep. It was an after party. And it's a list of who's who. It's an A list of who's
I've seen. So you've watched that video then, right?
Right.
It's a freaking amazing video with the entire cast dancing in the background, right?
Well, what's amazing is, like, there was all these A-list musicians there. I mean, the A-list of actors, the A-list of musicians. I mean, we're talking everybody like Usher and Beyonce. Everybody is there. And it's towards the end of the night, and everybody's going up and jamming and taking their turns jamming. And finally somebody says, I think it was, it's not Jimmy Kimmel. What am I thinking? The NBC guy, The Tonight Show. Who hosts?
Are you thinking about Fallon?
Jimmy Fallon, says to Prince, are you going to play a song? He went up and he plays, it's like the first note, like Dearly Beloved. And he says the rush of these A-list people to whip out their phones, like that he's never seen A-listers whip out their phones, and they all video. And then somebody it was somebody, if it wasn't Beyonce, it was somebody Beyonce's level, like Mariah Carey was going to go on next. Nope. Like nobody, nobody, not even a Mariah Carey, not a Beyonce, not an Usher, not a rocker, not a rapper. Nobody saw him do Let's Go Crazy and said, yeah, we're getting up on that stage after him. It's like, check, please. But yeah, Eddie Van Halen, because you're right. I mean, I'm not a Van Hagar guy. I will admit that they had moments, and you can't argue their commercial success. But dude, those first 5 albums that Van Halen did, fucking there's not a song on it that isn't great.
Yeah, well, I will say that I liked 3 of them 4 of them albums a lot. 2 of them albums a really lot, and then I thought 2 of them their albums was kind of but what it comes down to is that Eddie Van Halen it's funny, he used to complain all the time that all these guys sounds just like me, right? But I mean, in a way it was kind of sour grapes, but then in a way he was also correct in that there was just so much stolen from Eddie Van Halen, definitely in the hard rock in the 80s, right? And it's not just within the hard rock genre, just everywhere else. So there was a certain level of influence that Eddie Van Halen had that was, it was he was I think he was the first guy to have that influence since since Jimi Hendrix, right? Jimi Hendrix was the guy that said suddenly, like, it changed the way people looked at electric guitar, you know. And then Eddie was the second guy that did that.
No, so our list is complete.
Yeah.
So let's just, maybe there will be a different sideshow. Maybe we take a break on this. But dude, I love the idea of like keyboards, and I mean it. Like,
So I here's what I think we should do.
Musical genius is
so we should do keyboards, and I think we should think of maybe what that other is, kind of the instrumentation. So maybe like all
backing
other
band
instruments, right?
Like all instruments or backing band or
right.
But musical genius, dude, that's
well, we should go musical genius and then maybe composer, maybe, right? So because there are guys who are musical geniuses and there are guys who are great composers, right? And those are kind of, a lot of them cross over, but those are two different things. And I want to think maybe that's a good one to put in the same coupling. So
no, I'm excited. Well, we would talk about that. For the few people who actually listen, I love your opinions. Like, follow Biff on Twitter. Biff Plays Hockey, or you can hit me at Carnival. I think it's Carnival Podcast. I think that's what the Twitter handle is. It's in the link. It's in the link. But yeah, no, dude, this is fun, I'm really happy with the list. As a guitarist, as somebody who's played guitar, who's the guitarist that you've tried to emulate the most?
Oh, well, so me, it started off with a guy named Richie Blackmore, who is a guitarist for Deep Purple. So this is a conversation that Scott doesn't need to hear because I've had with him 8 gazillion times. But my guitar roots lie in European hard rock. So it's really two guys named Richie Blackmore, who is the Deep Purple Rainbow guy, and then Michael Schenker, who is the UFO Michael Schenker group guitarist. And the thing about it is that there's an entire family tree of music that has spawned from those two, either from people who they play with and so on. So Deep Purple is a huge one, where Deep Purple spawned Rainbow, which was like my favorite band growing up, but also Whitesnake. And there's a few other other side bands, but the funny thing about Whitesnake is that for most of America, Whitesnake is a hair metal band, and for me, Whitesnake is a blues rock band that had a hair metal phase. So it's really, if you think about it, Heart is a good example of that, right? Where you listen to the earlier Heart, the band that did Barracuda and and Crazy on You, and that band was very different from the 80s Heart that had huge commercial success with songs like These Dreams and Alone, right? But yeah, it's the same band, but that's the the kind of the step they took, and that's what Whitesnake was for me. So yeah, you guys kind of went the Heart route,
Another fun thing I'm just thinking, because you're mentioning, it's like, oh, in the 80s there were this and and then there was that. It's funny how some of the bands that I really like, that I think you really like, it's amazing when you have a band that came out of the British invasion, like the Kinks. Kinks are one of my favorite bands that, what they were doing in the mid 60s and continuing on to the late 80s, and how different, and it's like the longevity and the different. It's funny because is the Cheap Trick 70s or an 80s band?
Oh, that's a 70s band. I mean, it really was, right?
You and I agree on that. However, I forget what movie they had a huge song on, like Management.
What?
Yeah, they had a couple. I forget what movie. Management loves a song, and I don't know if it was St. Elmo's Fire or what other. It was some huge 80s movie that there's a Cheap Trick song, and
like
that album. Thank you.
Is it that song, really?
Yeah. So she associates like Cheap Trick with an 80s band. I'm like, wait, what? No. It's the same thing. It's so funny how so many of these bands are like that.
I mean, that's what the other that's a non-Tom Peters. That's after Tom Peterson left the band. So it's a slightly different band. Not that the bass player is maybe that important, but whatever. I mean,
but it is interesting. Biff, this was fantastic. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next weekend.
Talk to you next time.